back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and with me today is my temporary co-host, James D.
Que pasa, y'all? How's it going?
I will properly reintroduce James and give him the credit that he deserves because I forgot to do that till midway through last episode. But James, this new guy here, this new face, this new voice, James is currently transitioning to take over the co-host position of the exclusive episodes, which you can get access to via mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive, where James and I and Braden break down different mix techniques, production techniques, mastering techniques, and talk about why it's effective, why it's not, and give homework and advice to help you make better songs, to level it up. It's all 100% technical. They're short, they're concise, and we take techniques and quotes from other accomplished engineers and producers, so it's really great.
All while having fun along the way.
Yeah, we're talking a lot of shit, to be honest. It's
Some
mostly
good
us
fun.
talking shit and then like a little bit of tips. And then James is a great mixer. He's moved out here to LA recently. Longtime fan of the pod. Is a good human being.
Oh.
Blah 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 blah. You should listen to his advice, and he has a lot of great insight as well. I think that'll be different from mine, in a good way here. Okay, so today's episode, you probably read the title, is an interesting one. We haven't done this as well because usually it's about me and Lou, right? It's usually about what you learn from us. But in this sense, I think this will be a good one. Like, I want to talk about 5 things that we learned watching other people mix. And for me, these are like pretty career-changing moments, kind of like epiphany moments for me. Just like, I felt this like changed the way that I mix forever and the way I thought about mixing forever. But whether it's huge or whether it's something small that was really helpful, we're going to, between the two of us, talk about 5 different things that we've learned watching other people. So yeah, I'm going to start us off here. And this is the most, probably the biggest thing that I've ever learned from anyone. And I've had so many episodes, including an interview with Leslie Brathwaite, who is one of my mentors. Leslie Brathwaite is an awesome engineer, awesome human being. Just look up his credits. Just look it up. He's basically like he's definitely has the throne as a mixer for trap music. Like, especially out in Atlanta. Atlanta became a hub for hip hop music, partially thanks to the efforts of Leslie. He's the GOAT. He is the GOAT. And one thing that I learned from him, watching him mix, is the beauty, the importance of not overthinking shit. It's impressive. Like, at Mix with the Masters in France during that 1-week seminar, I asked the leaders of the group, like the owners of the company, the other people that were watching him and have watched other masters, quote unquote masters, come to the studio to teach mixing concepts. I asked them, how is Leslie compared to everybody else? And it was really interesting. One of them said this specifically. He's like, there's 2 sides of it. One, I'm so impressed because Leslie's mixes always sound so great. Number 2, I feel really shitty because everybody else has been talking about how complicated mixing is, and like Leslie's just shitting on everybody else by doing such good records with like the least amount of complicated processing he's ever seen in his life. Which goes to the value, like, I really believe, and this is like, again, like having Leslie as a mentor, this is just the way that I like to think. This is how I stay mentally healthy as well. And because I can't allow myself to overthink. That's like really unhealthy for me because it's very cyclical. I don't want to get into that cycle. So one of the things that I've learned that helps me make better mixes is to not overthink the process, to do what you think sounds good. I know that I'm basically just quoting, who's the producer's name? Oh man, don't overthink shit. Who says that? It's oh my gosh. You're like yelling at me. If you're listening to the pod, you're yelling at me for forgetting the producer's name. Oh my gosh, his face is in my head. I can't remember. Anyway, this is gonna burn me so bad. Don't overthink shit is Kenny Beats. I can't believe I forgot Kenny Beats for a moment. Anyway, Kenny Beats.
We apologize.
I'm just like quoting Kenny Beats right now. Don't overthink shit. Keep it simple, right? Just have fun with it. That rings so true for me to this day. I think that's part of the secret of my sauce. Like I feel like the reason why my mixes are, if it's better than anybody else's, it's because I'm way more in tune with the emotional connection of the song. Like I feel like I have the same gift that of everybody else, which is I like music. I love music. And I make sure that anything that I touch or I mix is something that I would love listening to, that I can enjoy as a fan. And that is more emotional than it is technical. And my technical skills, like EQing, compression, is only there to provide more emotional enhancement. I know that's like weird, hard to understand, because that's like every intermediate to advanced level like tip. And I think that's really hard to understand when you don't know what the tools do. But once you kind of figure out how to use your tools, that changed the game for me completely.
And if you want to see a visual example of what not overthinking it Leslie style looks like, he does live streams on YouTube. It's actually pretty cool. He'll play Xbox and like do Q&As. But he did one where he showed a session for a Cardi B mix he did, like Cardi B, one of the top artists right now. And it's insane to look at how little like plugins he has on there. Even some like he uses like the stock EQ a lot on Pro Tools just because it works for him. Yeah. So if you want to like actually see what that looks like, you could go check out his stream. But it's true. He uses so little.
And I wanna voice the obvious elephant in the room. I'm gonna mock some people here. Oh, but Leslie works on such a high level that he only receives really good stems. Oh. Bitch, that makes it harder to mix. Imagine getting stems that already sound good.
It's scary.
That's so intimidating. Imagine if Leslie and I got bad stems. We would still outmix you, so shut the fuck up. It's not about whether or not you get good stems or not. It's about you overthinking shit. You're overthinking it. No, getting good or bad stems, I mean, sure, it can make or break the song in general, but as a mixer for like the small part of the puzzle that you are, like if you're a producer and mixer, then it's partially your fault because like I think arrangement has more to do with it than like the mixing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like sometimes it feels like producers are really just trying to set you up to fail. Like it feels like that sometimes. I had a mix last week where I was like, "Yo, you can do a better job than this." Like, yeah, and like I don't want you to over rely on me. I know you have a bomb ass mixer, but I don't want you to over rely on me. Yeah, and like that does happen, but that's no excuse. I still think that's, if anything, like that's an even more dangerous situation where it's easier to overthink things.
Yeah, I guarantee that even though he's top tier, Leslie still every now and again gets poorly recorded stems. Oh, and he makes them sound great.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I'm not even going to get into that. Yeah, for sure. In fact, anyway, I'm not even going to tell that story. That's my first one for me. Like the importance of not overthinking it. It's not even about not overthinking it. It's about staying true to the part of you that got you into music, which is your genuine love for music. And that like emotional reverberation that you get in the soul, like the echo in your soul that you feel when you hear a good song. When you understand that the purpose of a mix is not to make a mix sound good, but the purpose of the mix is to make the song translate, to make the song feel good. Yeah,
and the better part of like not overthinking it and being decisive is you'll also mix faster. So you won't lose sight of what you wanted to do in the first place. So, because I feel like it's pretty easy to get burnt out if you're mixing a song for like hours and hours and hours. So yeah, being more decisive and not overthinking it could help you mix faster too.
I agree with that. It's for me, that's like the one, if I had one lesson that I wish I learned earlier, or like the one lesson that has affected my mixing the most, it's that. And that's difficult to do. Like, it's just something that you have to continue to work on. Like, in order to be able to stop overthinking, takes quite a bit of confidence, takes quite a bit of practice, confidence that comes from practice and putting in the time. Maybe it takes a little bit of like having that affirmation that like someone telling you that you're good, you know, whatever it takes, like to like, you know, start trying your very best to not overthink shit. And be true to your original childlike self. the really pure side of you that just loves music.
Yeah, you almost have to like proactively practice not overthinking it, and it eventually becomes easier to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. So that's my first one. Do you have one?
I got one. Yes. Okay. One that I learned from watching both Dee Kei and Lou and like other people online mixing is that it's okay sometimes to replace with like Trigger or other plugins drum samples if their sample just sounds bad. Would you agree with that?
Interesting. You've seen other people do it too?
Hmm?
Hmm.
I'm trying to think. Colin Britton, he does it. He has this whole trick of how to tune and he does that with like live drums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, but I feel like I do it because I'm a bad boy.
Oh.
So if you've seen other people do it, then I feel less like a bad boy.
Yeah, I do know it's decently common in like metal or like things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Like with heavier music. Yeah. For sure. We were talking before recording the episode with that point was specifically the idea of like, there's a difference between completely replacing a snare and supplementing it by duplicating it and then triggering the duplicate and blending it in to use it more of like an EQ.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's adding to it.
There's different.
Yeah. One in particular that I saw you do, which made perfect sense as to why, is the kick they had like a whoop, like before the kick hit. Do you remember that one?
That's a lot of them, actually.
Yeah. And so, like, pretty much what you did is when you blended in the other sample, you kind of took out the whoop with it.
Yeah. It's like there's a lot of kick drums where the sub frequencies are delayed. So it's like boom, whoop,
yeah.
Boom, whoop. So it's like transient. And then, like, a couple milliseconds later is the sub filling it up, which is like that's pretty normal. But sometimes that can kind of kill the transient.
Yeah.
So in order to maintain that punch, I try to get those sub frequencies to hit all at the same time.
Yeah, and if you are planning on like completely replacing it, depending on how different it makes it sound, it might be good to reach out to the artist just to make sure you're not completely changing the sound if they want that specific sound.
Yeah, that's definitely based on the relationship with the artist or the producer.
Yeah. So that's something to be cautious with, but just know it is an option.
Well, to replace it, you should ask, but to supplement it, I think it's okay as long as it's not like obvious. Like think about it like EQ.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask the producer if I can EQ their kick drum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's just something like that. Like, so be cautious with it, but know that it's an option. Especially if you have a good relationship, I feel like they'll let you do it.
That's actually pretty useful. I feel like I use supplemental Trigger. Like Trigger is definitely a plugin that I use quite often, like Slate Trigger. And I keep a sample pack of one shot drums that I keep, toms too. I think even the Slate default ones can sound good.
Yeah.
I think they sound a little bit creepy, like anyway, but I did think that they sound better than anything stock Logic drums. So just using those as supplemental. Yeah, it's pretty common. I like that a lot. That's pretty practical.
Do you have a process for like when you switch it out to make sure it's not like
if I can't
the pitch of it is like on or off?
Oh, no. Sometimes I mess with the tuning a little bit, but I don't overthink that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think putting the kick drum to the tune of the song is a make or break mix move.
Yeah, I just know again going back to like Colin Britton, he'll like, because he is replacing like a live drum kit. So like when he replaces the sample, he does this thing on Pro Q where you could like freeze it and it'll show you the fundamental note just to make sure that like the sample he's replacing it with is the same note as the same fundamental as like the other kick.
The risk with that is that if the bass is playing and they're in the same fundamental, they're hitting the one quite often. Like the bass player is hitting one, the bass, the root note quite often. And if you match the kick drum, you're actually literally competing with the bass more. So if you get it in an in-between frequency where it's not in the key, you actually conflict with the bass less. So that's something to think about as well. So that's why I don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Like if it sounds good, it sounds good.
Yeah.
But I've heard a lot of people say that they like, pull out frequencies or push in frequencies or try to match the thing. I don't think that that's a make or break mix move. But it is a cool option.
Yeah. Very situational.
Very situational. Yeah. But yeah, I like that. That's a really good practical thing. I don't ever think to teach that sort of stuff. Yeah. Don't be afraid to replace or supplement samples. I've also, in the opposite sense, you know what I've done? Dee Kei, how'd you get the kick drum to hit so damn hard? Well, here's the thing. You had like 9 kick drums stacked. and I deleted 8 of them. That's how I got the kick drum to hit so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you know when to mute it.
Yeah. So it's like, that's not the save all, but it's the idea, like, like, again, being in tune with what sounds good is going to help you be better than doing something because someone told you that it's good.
Yeah, these are like good tools to have and to try. And if it sounds better, go with it. If not, like, figure something else out.
By the way, that in-between thing, the only time that I could think of where, like, so with like EDM music, sometimes the kick drum is like pitched. Because like with most kick drums or snares, like snares sometimes have like a fundamental pitch, but most of the time it's like a splat.
Yeah.
But like if there's an EDM kick drum, which is just like an 808, like a very short 808, ooh,
yeah,
ooh, ooh, like if it's really obvious, I might tune it.
Yeah.
And then saturate it with third order harmonics to try to get the in-betweens that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that's again, that's based on the song.
Yeah,
okay.
Situational again. Yeah.
So that's number 2. I think that's really awesome. Number 3, which is coming from me. This is from Bob Horn. I love Bob Horn. And I think he's an awesome human being. Shout out to you, Bob. And on top of that, I think his mixes sound great. I think his low end sounds amazing. Something that I learned from him is that there's a part of me that, like, engineers kind of do this thing like a dick measuring competition where they're like, can you hear this? And it's like, we're listening for dither and like everybody's like, yeah, I can hear that. But like, I'm sitting there going like, I can't fucking hear that. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, especially not in a room that I'm unfamiliar with, on speakers that I'm unfamiliar with, like in an angle, like me not in the sweet spot. Like, I'm not fucking hearing that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that people have the ego. Engineers have the ego and pretend like they're hearing something. And it turns out that the plugin that they were messing with, that everybody said that the sounds was better, it was bypassed the entire time. I fucking hate that. But that being said, I've seen, like, watching Bob Horn mix, he does things that are very small and subtle, but can change the feel. So the idea of, because I'm pretty abrasive with my mixing, like I am just like brash, big moves all the time, big moves. But I'm afraid that if I like really focus on the super minute details, then I start to overthink things. And going back to my first point, Bob does a really good job of kind of doing small, subtle moves and not overthinking it. Because you can really hear the difference. Like, he'll pull out this frequency in the bass, which lets the kick drum, you can hear the kick drum come out a little more, or vice versa. Pull it out of the kick drum or boost it in the kick drum, whatever, and you can hear it. And he's got the tightest, out of anybody that I've ever heard mix, he's always got the tightest low end. He's got really tight, controlled low end. And same thing, like, he spends a lot of time, like, I know I talk about mixing fast. He does not mix as fast. But it's very controlled, and he's somehow able to stay focused and somehow able to stay subjective, takes lots of breaks. And he's like almost the opposite of the type of mixer that I am. And I was like, I loved watching that and to learn that from him. And it kind of, I don't know what the point I'm trying to make here, but the point, like, it's like the importance of intentional small moves and how that can affect the mix.
Yeah, like, it doesn't always have to be a big move kind of thing. I know what you're talking about too. Is either him or his assistant talked about it on a podcast, but like something about like he'll do that small, very small, like cut out some frequencies in the low end and it will just like open up everything else. So yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it too, but it's a very, almost again like having the kind of the confidence in your ear to just like you could trust that like this, you could trust that this little move will make it sound better and that you don't have to go over the top sometimes. Yeah,
that takes a lot of skill to do that. And because, like, again, I would recommend that people not to do, I think people do that too much.
Yeah.
But Bob does it in a way where it's like he's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a level beyond, because like most people hyper focus on the details too much, and they're not really making it better. So I recommend to don't overthink it, right? To mix fast, to do big abrasive moves. But then he takes it like the next level beyond that is to like small, subtle, on purpose moves and bring it back to that sort of like baseline level. And he does a really great job. But he's also not like super complicated like Andrew Sheps. So he's still not quite Andrew Sheps level, who's like known for paralleling everything and like having the most crazy, unique workflows in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's something that I appreciate as well. So coming back, so as much as I think that like not overthinking is important, Bob taught me to kind of bring it back down and to, if something needs it, it needs it. And it's okay to spend time on it.
Yeah. Yeah. To get the little details and stuff. Yeah. I can't really think of more on that. That's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Let's see. I have the next point. And I'm trying to think of the best way to put this in words too. It kind of relates to what you said. Is controlling the low end in terms of, I feel like when I first came out here, one of my biggest weaknesses was in my low end, and it was kind of wonky. I think in watching, again, both you and Lou, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but like, you guys seem to put an effort in making sure the low end is consistent and like controlled.
Controlled is a good word for good low end.
Yeah, like you said you don't use multiband EQ, but you'll like pretty much do some heavy compression sometimes on the low end or things like that to keep it in control.
Yeah, or multiband compression. I don't use multiband compression.
Yeah.
Very rarely.
Yeah, and like since I've kind of started applying those things and really focusing on like, okay, how can I make the low end stay where it's at and like not go all whoa and things like that. I feel like my mixes have like been able to get better and even louder too, because that with the controlled low end, it's not eating up a bunch of energy and headroom when I'm going into a clipper and then a limiter. So yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but yeah. So like, I guess to explain to everyone, like, what do you usually do to control the low end?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you, yeah.
Oh, good question. What am I doing usually to control the low end? Compression, obviously. Potentially some narrow cut EQs. Like if some basses resonate more loud at a single note than at the other notes. Saturation, distortion to make sure, depending on the song and the needs, to make sure that if there's sub frequencies that are really low, like here's something like this is something that I only do every once in a while. But I'll duplicate if their sub bass is like an octave lower than what I know most people are ever going to hear.
Yeah.
So it's eating up the headroom because it's like 20 to 40 hertz of just with the root note.
Yeah.
Right. On these 808s. And what I do is I duplicate it and I turn it up an octave. And then I saturate the shit out of that and cut out the low end of that. And I blend that in a little bit to make sure that like, if we're eating the headroom, I'm going to make sure that it's heard a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, some things like that, depending on the song. It's not, I wonder if it's not so much about the techniques that we use, but rather I like the idea of like controlled low end.
Yeah, I think I like
the
that.
Importance of low end, yeah.
At least from it seems like watching you do it, it's something I've kind of started doing with my mixes too, is taking that time in the very beginning of the mix to like focus on getting the low end right.
Oh,
and
right.
I feel like that clears it up when you're starting to add in other elements. It helps kind of already give reference to like, okay, this space is already under control. And it kind of helps you with the rest of the mix style things in. I
mean, you know that I believe sincerely that you should mix the bass first. I mean, the idea that like most people mix with the drums first. They start with the kick drum, they go to the snare, they go to the toms, they go to the overheads, the room, whatever, and then they get to the bass.
Yeah.
But it's like you have so much time to forget what the kick drum sounds like.
Yeah.
When the most important part is the kick drum and the bass. So I just do bass and then immediately go into the kick drum.
That's what
make sure those two
yeah.
things are done first so the foundation is solid. Because like, yeah, the low end can totally ruin a mix or like can make the song quiet, can make the song feel off. Low end is important, especially with like modern music.
Yeah.
Less so in like rock, where it's like there's not as much low end or it's not as vital.
Yeah.
But yeah, with like modern pop kind of stuff, low end is very crucial. So it's got to be controlled. It can be a lot. You can have a lot of low end, but it's got to be controlled. It can't be floppy.
Yeah, I think that's floppy is another good word too. Yeah. Finding, and I think that's like, and again, I think that's why like that little whatever Bob Horton does when he cuts out those low ends and it opens things up is he probably takes out that little bit of floppiness. Yeah, I feel like if you once you start getting your low end under control, it'll I feel like it'll right off the bat make your mixes overall louder just because it's not eating up a lot of headroom. But yeah, I feel like that was like a pretty big difference I've like noticed when coming out here, noticing
on a personal
you guys.
level.
Yeah, on a personal level.
I mean, it is LA where like we basically push the envelope on low end out here.
Yeah,
Say Nashville pushing the envelope and creating the culture of low end. It might be Atlanta, but it's LA or Atlanta.
Yeah, and it still sounds loud. Like that's the thing. It sounds you can make the low end sound loud, but like if it controlled at the same time. Yeah.
That's true. Intentional as well is another adjective or like word to use there. Okay. My last thing, number 5. This is something that I learned from a local dude, someone an amateur, as far as career wise, but I respect him so damn much. And I've talked about him so damn much. He kind of changed my perspective on many different things. He's like one of the most talented producers I've ever had the pleasure of working with. His name is Nels, and I've had him on the show before as well. He's out in Utah. What up, Nels? I learned from him the importance of effects, reverbs, delays, even tremolo, panning, automation, contrast, intentional contrast from the production, and then arrangement in general, and how important that is. Like I still to this day, like, I mean, obviously it's this is not like a final answer, but I think that arrangement is more important than mixing. That if the arrangement isn't thoughtful, and if you just put a bunch of mid-range instruments, and you just have a bunch of Wurlitzers and a bunch of Rhodes and a bunch of like guitars with a bunch of mid-range, like there's only so much that mixing can do. So it's about like you got to have thoughtful arrangement. He made that very clear for me. I think he still to this day has like some of the best use of reverbs, tremolo, delay that I've ever heard in my goddamn life. Like, and he is so good at it. And one of the things that makes him so good is the contrast. He will use a delay for one word in a 5-minute song, and you will never hear that same delay ever again.
Interesting.
And it's just like, what?
Yeah.
And like he'll take the time to make sure that there's contrast. He is so good at having money moments where it's just like ear candy, just placing small ear candy. I don't think that makes or breaks a song, but it just elevates a song to like such a high level. And how that affects me as a mixer, I know he's not a mixer, and this is like not a mix thing, but how that affects me as a mixer is like, you'll notice there's like a classic Dee Kei move is one, rarely ever do I do blanket reverbs. Even if I'm mixing a song fucking fast, I'll still take a moment to like automate that reverb send from verse to chorus. And the classic thing that I love to do is like, I'll like hyper emphasize and automate the reverb to be loud towards the end of the pre-chorus. And then the final bar of the pre-chorus, I'll make it fucking dry. No reverb, no echo, no delay. And then that reverb explodes again in the chorus.
Yeah.
Like that's something. And I'm like not afraid to have like a really bright, harsh reverb because of Nels. Like Nels is like, if you've seen my Valhalla vintage verb, like they're really harsh, bright reverbs that it's like they stand out. Like it's not a background thing to make sure that you have this like this feeling of sensation of space. No, a reverb is an instrument. Like he will literally make samples out of reverbs. And it's like this when it comes to my effects game, which I think that my effects game is all right. Like I don't think I'm the best in the world, but he really put me on to at least being thoughtful about it. First step, being thoughtful about it and doing it intentionally, doing a lot of automation and being okay using a reverb or like a delay throw or like weird things like tremolo or like different things that you've never used within your plugins, like weird modulation tools that you've never used, using it sparsely, like being okay with using it only once in the song, trying out different ideas, and like building contrast with that has definitely affected my mixing. And I think that is one of the coolest things. Dude, you got to listen to anything. He bro has like 15 monthly listeners. And it is just so incredibly talented. I love his songs to death. I think he's just opened up a door for me. Like, I think, and now, like, I can't listen to mixes where there is a blanket reverb or a blanket delay. I think it sounds cheap. Sounds cheap and low effort.
Yeah.
And like, how do you make, and going on about this, like, I do feel like automation is one of the ways to make a record feel like you spent time on it.
Oh yeah.
Like to make it feel expensive, like to make something feel expensive, you have to make it like, think of like Mr. Beast or like a YouTube creator. You can tell when it feels like someone took effort to make that video. It doesn't actually have to take effort, but you can get good at making it feel like you took effort. I think automating is one of those things as well. Like to convey that feeling of like, this sounds fucking expensive because there's so much contrast and there's so many small things that aren't repeated.
Yeah. Like even little delay throws here or there could like, it could bring it up. Yeah.
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 I think it's a big deal and you don't want to force it.
Yeah.
But I think, that kind of changed the game for me as far as like how I think about effects.
Yeah, something I think you mentioned in the beginning of talking about him too is the arrangement in terms of having the instruments kind of more properly fill out the frequency spectrum. I think that's someone else who I think does that well is Mike McClellan, who you work with.
Oh, great producer.
I've seen his stems before and how they sound unmixed, and they already sound amazing unmixed. And I think a big part of that is that he knows how to produce and how to fill out everything so that like everything still has its place and they're not like, you don't have like 8 guitars that are doing the same thing stacked in like, one
he
spot.
is so tasteful.
Yeah, he knows how to do it.
He doesn't put a guitar there because you can put a guitar there.
Yeah.
He only does it if it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it just feels balanced like right off the bat. And so I think that helps the mix even be better.
Every great producer that I've ever worked with, whether it's trap or full big band funk, right? Every great producer knows when too much is too much. They're very intentional with when they put things there. Good with ear candy. Again, the contrast, the purposeful placement, and not just easily repeated for the sake of repetition.
Yeah.
Or like, I know how to play guitar or I know how to play the Rhodes here and it'd be cool to just add a Rhodes here to show off that I can play Rhodes. No. It's so intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't have to mix it because the arrangement itself is already mixed.
Yeah. And at that point, I feel like it does, because sometimes when mixing, it could sometimes feel like you're fixing then enhancing. But I feel like with a producer who knows how to record it right, it's nice because then you're just enhancing the song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And with recordings, like for example, like with funk or rock, where it's like a drummer, like a proper drummer, and you're not replacing it with samples, the drummer itself needs to feel that as well. I mean, it's eventually the producer's fault because like the producer's going to be in charge, just like a director of a film. Like, hey, can you hit the kick drum harder during the chorus? Can you be a little softer on the cymbals during this part here? Can you change up the pattern a little bit? Like it's at the end of the day, it's the producer's choice, but the drummer having the ability to do that. Because I've met some drummers that they're like metronomes. They can be on time, but they're horrible drummers because they only know one dynamic, which is loud.
Yeah.
And so like that's difficult to work with. But yeah, dude, Mike is such a good job. And one easy way of doing this in a trap, like, so I think like trap is a good example of talking about arrangement because it's really simple. having a different kick drum for the kick versus the verse. Like that's a common trap arrangement thing that can really change the vibe of a song.
Yeah.
And it can appropriately lower the intensity during the verses so it can properly explode in the chorus if that's what the intention is.
Yeah.
Like changing the tone of the 808s. So it's like I don't have to mix much if I have two different 808 tracks and one is for the verses and one is for the chorus and they feel different, so I don't have to automate anything.
Yeah.
It's different for a rock band because like what are you going to do? Just play louder, play the guitar louder in the chorus? Like that's why pedals are so good for guitar players because they can change the tone for different parts of the sound. Like you're arranging the song with the tools. You can play louder, you can double up guitars, you can play an acoustic. If you're recording, you can play an acoustic guitar versus an electric guitar. You can have a clean guitar versus a dirty guitar. Again, use a boost. These are all the arrangement is. Imagine if it was the mixer's job to make sure that your guitar is loud enough during the guitar solo.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna miss it half the times.
Yeah. Like
So if you did half the work, it's gonna make the mix sound better.
I'm trying to remember. I feel so bad. He used to work at the studio. I was talking to him at the mixer last week, and he works a lot in like Spanish guitar kind of genre. And I was just asking him from a mixing perspective how it works because like he said it's usually just 4 guitars playing and stuff, and a big part of it is that just in the way that it's arranged, it takes up everything. So even though it's only guitars being played, they're playing different parts of the guitar, or they're only playing high guitar on one track and then like different kind of guitar on the other.
Talking about like recording a mariachi band?
I'm trying to remember I don't remember specifically the genre.
For example, like in a mariachi band or like a string quartet, you have a cello which takes up different frequencies than the viola, which takes up different frequencies from the first and second violin.
Yeah.
The first violin is playing higher notes, usually playing the melody.
Yeah.
The violin, the second violin is playing like harmony. So it's like it's automatically being arranged, so it's not conflicting with each other. You can hear the cello clearly.
Yeah. It's kind of like Junior H. He's like a Spanish artist kind of vibe. But yeah, it's like even with like just a few of the same instruments, they were still conscious of making sure it's not just a bunch of guitars playing, but that it fills out the space.
Yeah. That's super duper important. I do, again, like arrangement, everything. Nels is also the same dude that mixes on his wired Apple headphones, and he can outmix most people. He's a producer, not a mixer, using Apple earbuds because that's what he listens to most. He's like really used to them.
Yeah,
and he can outmix most other producers I've met.
Respect.
He's so talented. Yeah, so. Shout out to Nels. I can only speak highly of him. Yeah, that's it that's 5 things for us.
That was a good convo.
That's a good episode there. What are the takeaways here? 1, don't overthink it. 2, don't be afraid to adjust the drums. And make sure that the song is hitting in a way that you want, that the artist wants. Number 3, as much as you don't overthink it, don't be afraid to get detailed work in. Number 4 was, what was yours again?
Low end, control your low end.
Control your low end. Taking the time to control your low end. Number 5, contrast, effects, and arrangement.
I think a lot of these have the overarching theme of taking the time.
Which is so funny because at the same time, like, if you're taking too much time, my number 1 thing was don't take too much time.
Yeah.
So I do feel like if the producer and the producer takes the time, the song artist takes the time and to do the work, then it's less important for the mixer to take the time.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't want to let the mixer take too much time. I think that's like a good goal to have. Like if you're a producer that is relying too heavily on the mixer, like it's not going to be as good as a mix.
Yeah.
No matter how good the mixer is.
Produce so well that like the mixer gets to just focus on enhancing your song and they don't have to fix anything.
Yeah. As a mixer, I think it's not the best to spend too much time on something. As a producer, I think it is your job to overthink it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the mixer's job is to remind you like, hey, you don't need to. You did a good job.
Yeah.
That's in every scenario that I've worked in and people that I've talked to, that always ends up making the best products. Like the songs that people are most proud of, it's the one where the producer, even if he was in the zone, in flow state, and didn't spend that much time on it because they was feeling everything, like took the time to alleviate the pressure from the mixer's job, and the mixer like barely had to do anything. Like those are the ones that like in all parties are like the happiest with. So maybe this episode is about putting the pressure back onto the producer, and to like, as much as I think mixing is important, I don't think it's half as important as like a good producer.
Yeah, it's a good indicator that like the higher you get up, the mixers do less because the producers do a lot. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of a good indicator of how professional you're being with it.
Yeah. There's something to be said as well. As like usually producers at various different levels, top or bottom, it's there's not always a budget for producers because you can give away percentage of songwriting or whatever. But there's almost always a budget for mixers. You don't send out a song without getting it mixed. That's so whatever. Take that as you will. All right. On that note, thank you so much for listening. Check out the exclusive episodes. You want to pitch the exclusive episodes real quick?
Yes. On the exclusive episodes, we talk about things a lot more technical. At the moment, it's Dee Kei, Braden, and I. And then by the end of the year, it'll just be Dee Kei and I. And we take clips from famous, well-known mixers, and we kind of break them down and talk about more specifics. Like we'll talk about sometimes very specific things like settings that we'll do sometimes, or it could sometimes be more broad. But yeah, if you're looking for more specific technical tips, that's the good place to go.
Awesome. Again, mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive to get access to those episodes. $4 a month or $40 a year. Thank you for all of our subscribers. If you haven't already, if you've gotten any sort of benefit from listening to this podcast, free way you can support us is rate the podcast 5 stars. Appreciate it. Just say a couple sentences. We see those numbers going up. We see the comments. We love it. That's free support, and appreciate y'all.
Yeah, we love all of you.
Yeah,
especially you, Jonathan.
Especially, who the fuck is Jonathan?
I don't know, but there's someone out there who's like, oh,
there's a dude named Jonathan out there listening right now. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Alrighty. On that note, happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy. Ooh.